our sober waking consciousness, the thing that we believe is everything, is just a tiny slice in this vast sort of spectrum of different ways we can be conscious. And every one of them renders a different experience of what's out there. We can have an enchanted science, we can have a scientific spirituality, combining both the looking outward and the looking inside and the working with our consciousness. To heal the world, you first have to heal yourself, or to love the world, you first have to love yourself.
Welcome, James, to Soul, Cosmos, and Consciousness. First of all, I'm thrilled. I've been waiting for this for a long time. I want to kickstart this discussion/dialogue. We love the term dialogue because we love the work of David Bohm and how he envisioned a possibility that we can explore topics with absolute openness. And I also authored a book called Open. I'd love to know more about what has made you so passionate, so fearless in asking questions that most people with your background never want to either visit or, worse, reject.
I don't know how much this just was something that seemed to emerge when I started to realize when I was 15 or 16 that I wanted to go and study physics because I wanted to understand the universe. And then the more you get into theoretical physics, and then when you finished with the course, you realize that there's so many more things that are enigmatic and are paradoxes. And for me, I always try to sort of understand and sort of get to the core of some of these more complex topics also in philosophy. And that's why I started to write about these things more also for me to understand it. And then as a side effect to try and make these ideas more accessible to sort of a lay person audience. And the more I got involved with this, so we have quantum computers, we have amazingly smart AI, we have rovers on Mars. You would think we nailed it, but if you try and understand what exactly is going on and all the open questions, you realize that there are so many very existentially troubling issues. And these usually don't get broadcast because it's something that you wouldn't really do in your daily job as a physicist because, yeah, either you're working on things you want to understand. So kind of, I don't know, offloading these more philosophical themes to, yeah, like philosophers of science who actually mostly don't get taken too seriously by scientists. And that's when I realized that this is kind of a big blind spot that many scientists are or were very uninterested in philosophical debates, which is sad because once we stumbled upon the quantum over 100 years ago, the first generation of quantum physicists, they were very engaged in questions of ontology. What is the nature of the thing we're doing? And then the next generations came along, got disillusioned with this philosophical approach and just did the shut up and calculate approach, which leads us to our technology. But these questions are still open. We still, to this day, don't know how we should understand the quantum world, what it's telling us. And for me, the craziest thing is discovering that the topic of consciousness was not taken seriously in academia until the 90s. It was a fringe idea, like the soul, something that you don't really, it's not a serious topic for scientists to look at. And I just couldn't believe that this is the case. And no wonder today we still really don't know what consciousness is. We don't have a good definition or a universally accepted one. There's one person counted 350 theories, academic theories, communicate the craziness and the alternatives that are out there and always have been. And the reason why they're not talked about more is just because of a prejudice of the time.
I totally agree with you. I want to jump in here maybe and take us even on a deeper dive into this, because what in my field of depth psychology, we would refer to what you're talking about as non-ordinary states of consciousness. And that's not a term that's owned by depth psychology, of course, but it is one that is, I think, really important for us to bring in here, because there are many, many ways to bring us into these states where we have awareness that is not just our everyday awareness. Like when we go through our usual days, we have the blinders on. And I'm curious about what you think about mystical experiences, because that is the one constant I think that we have had access to as Westerners in our modern Western society that allow us to be able to access something more about consciousness than that everyday waking consciousness that we usually fall into or that we can even talk about. In my own experience, this is a bit of a leading question because I had a spontaneous mystical experience that I was not expecting, had no idea that it even existed, and that cracked the door open for me then, of course, to go on my own deep dive into trying to understand what had happened to me. So I'm curious about your thoughts about mystical experiences. What are those? Have you had any of your own? And how would you gauge those in the framework of science and what your work has been about?
Okay, wow. So, first of all, it's amazing that these things can happen spontaneously. So you're just sitting by a river and suddenly you have this revelation and you understand how the universe works and you have this experience of this apparently divine love that's behind the things that exist, and that this is something stable and it happens across cultures. I mean, I find the most sort of interesting denominator of the Abrahamic religions is what their mystics were talking about, because it always boils down to experiencing the divine in your or through your own consciousness. And first of all, this can be very transformational, obviously. I mean, like Federico Fagin, I think he helped or was instrumental in engineering the first commercial computer chip. And he also was talking about his mystical experience where suddenly one night he gets up, gets a glass of water, goes back to bed, and then this beam of light shoots out of his chest. And since that day, he is an idealist saying, look, consciousness is fundamental. Everything else is derived. This is absolutely clear for him. And I doubt he would ever have gotten that far without some experience of what it is. And to me, I believe the more or less the shamans, the mystics, the meditators, and the psychonauts, what these people are experiencing in non-ordinary states of consciousness, it seems to be the same contour of this again, idealism being the best word I find describing it, so that there is this, you can call it intelligence or consciousness, this field of consciousness or this love that is the sort of the substrate from which the physical is propped up on, or so the physical is derived. It's more of a projection which has its roots and originates and also probably is guided by this non-physical level of reality that is there. And if you don't experience this yourself, you will never really, first of all, understand the dimension, because these are transcendental experiences. I mean, like William James wrote, these are ineffable. These are things with radical novelty which don't compare to anything you've ever thought or experienced or have constructs for or ideas in your life. So these are really something beyond. And yeah, if you haven't experienced this, you would basically not really believe a person telling you. So that's why I find sort of finding more reliable ways of reproducing non-ordinary states. And there are many, from breathwork to trance to shamanic drumming to meditation, which are harder things to do, or through psychedelics, with the disclaimer that psychedelics are very potent and can be dangerous. But these are very reproducible ways of accessing these realms. And this is something that now, luckily, with the psychedelic renaissance, the destigmatization of psychedelics again, and the emergence of the philosophy of psychedelics, where people are now in an academic context asking, what does this mean? What if this assumption that these are just hallucinations, they're just delusions, you shouldn't really bother talking to people who tell you these things? What does this tell us about consciousness? So how come, and also with the neuroscience, because with, I think in 2012, we had the first neuroimaging studies of brains of people under the influence of psychedelics. And it's not really doing what we expected with more activity. they had to come up, so the physicalist explanation had to come up with a new mechanism of entropy. So suddenly, when you're sober, your brain activity correlates with the phenomenal content of what you're experiencing. But suddenly, on psychedelics, it's entropy, it's noise, which is apparently responsible for these ineffable transcendental experiences, which again seems a bit wanting. But so, yeah, to answer your questions, I think this is very relevant because science, rightly so, is framed from a third person perspective, this objective reality that's out there. But the question becomes, is this really a thing? The philosopher Thomas Nagel wrote an essay called The View from Nowhere, where he argues that doesn't actually exist. It's a construct, it's a fiction, it's an abstraction. And what we only always have is our subjective view. And I believe that, yeah, slowly science is more open to incorporating this subjectivity into sort of its domain of exploration, because you can rightly say, look, subjectivity isn't worth looking at because people are unreliable, they misremember, they lie, they whatever. You shouldn't really sort of take anybody's word for anything, but still that there are these subjective experiences that are being made and that they're different and that they seem to have like stable properties and that this should be explored. I think slowly we are at the point where this is happening. And yeah, also in psychedelic research, where now nearly every university has a department of psychedelic research where they are just investigating the phenomenal content of what people are experiencing and trying to catalog what is happening here and trying to sort of, yeah, just sort of find out what the map is, sort of expose the map of what's happening here. Because as you say, our sober waking consciousness, the thing that we believe is everything, is just a tiny slice in this vast sort of spectrum of different ways we can be conscious, and every one of them renders a different experience of what's out there. And as we don't, I mean, we're all locked in consciousness, we can never know what's out there. This could all be a simulation, I could be dreaming. It's kind of interesting to put this on par with my sober waking consciousness, where, I mean, neuroscientists have been telling us for quite a while now that's just as much a hallucination as hallucinations are, except it's tethered to a bit more sort of external input. But basically, it's the same world that's being conjured up. And also people like Donald Hoffman, who bring mathematical models in showing that our consciousness is not primed to give us a faithful representation of what's out there. It's optimized for survival. So what we think is like, look, I can see it, but there's a word out there, I can touch it. That's an illusion. That's something which your consciousness is putting between this external world and your inner life. And this means that there's no certainty, which I think is a good thing, because it should open us up to be more tolerant of ambiguity and conflict. I mean, even like, because it should open us up to be more tolerant of ambiguity and conflict. I mean, even like, yeah, in science that, or in quantum mechanics, that there's these illogical things that are happening which make no sense. I mean, they only make no sense if you approach it from a rational perspective and expect logic to be the only framework to which reality should adhere. But I mean, that's just an expectation and something that worked. But just, yeah, sort of moving beyond sort of these ideas which have been around for so long and have been very successful in generating technology, but haven't actually allowed us to understand more of the metaphysics that are seemingly behind the things that are.
You know, what's remarkable about how you describe all this is how difficult it is to be conscious, how incredibly frustrating it is to continuously be the hostage of your primal consciousness, which we need to navigate and see danger when we need to see danger. And yet there's so much behind that wall. It took me decades. And I have to say, it's only through psychedelic experiences that some of that wall finally broke for me. But in your case, have you found the need and almost the requirement? We're all talking about safe and mostly spiritual considerations here of the use of these very strong, potent entheogens. But have you found it really a breakthrough. I haven't had the benefit of a spontaneous mystical experience. I was hoping for one, but as you get older, it's like, I don't think I have the time. Let's do something else. Have you found it to be your case?
So I did as a teenager. I took LSD once, too much LSD, so that was a weird experience, which resulted in 1 year of spontaneous panic attacks, which was horrible. So yeah, the disclaimer.
Oh gosh.
And since then, I mean, writing the books and writing about all these people having these experiences, uh, I kind of considered like I should also be exploring this just even as a, I mean, just as an author, kind of as a requirement. I mean, Michael Pollan, who wrote the book How to Change Your Mind about the psychedelic renaissance, he also did 5-MeO DMT, and he describes how this works. And he just did that just as his job as writing the book. And I, for a long time, had this in the back of my mind, but I always was a bit, yeah, sort of apprehensive because of the trauma from when I was a teenager.
Mm.
And yeah, now a bit over 3 months ago, I had this ayahuasca calling and had two ceremonies spaced 3 months apart. Each ceremony was Friday and Saturday, so 2 doses of ayahuasca. And the the first ceremony on the second evening that really blew my mind, and it actually, as I found out then for the second ceremony, it kind of gave me a bit of a psychedelic trauma, because what I experienced was just, I wasn't prepared for this. Although I thought I was prepared, and I was like, hey, I mean, this, please show me. And what I was shown just uh, sort of, I don't know, probably the easiest way to explain is being shown what's behind the veil, and the speed, the complexity, the information, the intelligence, the I mean, this was just the intensity. It was unbearable. I was just, I mean, I was sitting there with closed eyes, having visions for an hour or two, and just not believing what I was experiencing, and just knowing that this is just too much. This is, I cannot believe this is happening. This is just too much. And yeah, such experiences, they, I mean, having them personally, yeah, it's very meaningful, because it does seem to then confirm things you had as an intuition or you just held intellectually, and now it's something more embodied, something more sort of energetic. So yeah, that I'm really happy that this happened, and even if it was very intense and overwhelming, it just, it helped me a lot also realize that, I mean, as a, yeah, studying theoretical physics, PhD in complexity science, this is all in the head and rational. And now just reaching a point where I'm like, the stupidity of the Western mind, like, how can you be so clever and have all this technology and just be so stupid to not need to look inside, and that there's this whole universe or multiverse of experience inside of you? How is this possible that we miss that? Me including. I mean, this is just, it's just insane. I can't believe it. And these experiences help me just, yeah, sort of also be more critical of the way we do things. And that just, I mean, logic, rationality, common sense, these are great tools, but they're no way exhaustive, and they don't, yeah, I mean, there's so many other modes of knowing and experiencing. And I mean, we know this from shamanic healing and the pharmacology. And I mean, so much of Western medicine is based on stuff coming out of the rainforest, which is mediated by shamans. And if you ask them, well, how did you know? And they would tell you, well, the plants told us, the plant teachers, because they were engaging with this dialogue in a non-physical realm, apparently. And yeah, just kind of this blind spot of like this certainty of the Western mind, what can be and what can't be. And I mean, slowly we're getting better, like things like, I don't know, psi phenomenon, supernatural stuff, which things like telepathy, telekinesis, all these things which involve interaction of consciousness and matter. I mean, if idealism is correct, and this really is all based on the same substance, which is consciousness, then it makes sense that there would be a link between the inner and the outer. And recently, I think 2 years ago, even a book appeared in the Routledge scientific publisher. I mean, they're like very conservative, orthodox scientific publishing house. And they published this book called Dark Cognition by David Vernon, where he's showing that, look, it's hard to reproduce these phenomena, but they don't go away. They've been around. I mean, like 30 years ago, there was, I think, an op-ed in Nature article saying, oh, this has all been debunked. We should stop talking about these things because they don't happen. No, they keep on happening. And he was making the case saying that, look, this only, I mean, this is kind of obvious, but this only is prohibited if you adopt a physicalist point of view, because then there's no way this can happen. So anybody claiming this is either lying or incompetent. But if you adopt a different metaphysical view, like idealism, then suddenly everything changes. And then suddenly you expect these things. And then you wonder, okay, if like 95% of scientists doing these experiments are expecting them not to work, how much that influences the outcome. And so, yeah, we're slowly opening up to a couple of, I don't want to say errors, but just some certainties that the Western mind had, which we're now realizing that actually, no, this is not at all clear. And there could be other valid explanations which are just as unprovable as, I mean, physicalism saying there's only the physical and everything within it is physical processes. This is a metaphysical claim of how, this is an ontological claim. This is not what science is telling you. Science tells you how stuff works. So confusing the two, which you would if you don't care about philosophy, is what most physicists do. And that's why they believe that, oh, if I'm anti-physicalist, I'm being anti-rational and anti-science. That's not true. This is totally, these are category errors. And slowly this is being uncovered. And slowly, like newer generations of scientists are revisiting these metaphysical assumptions, which people used to think, oh, I don't have any, I don't need any, which again already is a metaphysical assumption. So you cannot get around metaphysics, as Whitehead told us. Assuming an uncritical metaphysics is also a metaphysics, just a bad one. So,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, this then really sort of influences what questions are asked, where research grant money goes, where what people are looking for, what gets put in the drawer. So this has a big influence. And if we're not explicit in our metaphysical commitments, which mostly we aren't as scientists, then this is really bad. And we should slowly open up. And again, I'm pretty optimistic that this is happening as we're really seeing this renaissance of idealism, not only in philosophy, but also in parts of science, where there's a bunch of quantum interpretations of quantum mechanics, like cubism, or the group in Vienna with Zeilinger and Markus Müller, who are trying to build models where a first person perspective is where you start. So bringing in subjectivity and maybe, yeah, we can progress, because in the foundations of physics, I would argue nothing has happened in 30 years. We went on this huge detour with string theory, which was fun and it was great math, but it didn't help anything in understanding reality at a fundamental level. And now maybe if we're more open to, yeah, reevaluating what exactly are we sort of assuming here? What is the nature of what is our metaphysical foundation? And how does that affect the science we put on top of it? And I think this is slowly sort of the pendulum is swinging back.
There's a lot of exciting research on, the direct effect of psychedelics on the brain. Of course, as a neuroscientist, I'm a sucker for that. At the same time, we keep asking the wrong questions. And, is it about a specific neurotransmitter? Is it about certain areas lighting up under ayahuasca or DMD, 5-MeO DMT or ketamine? But what I have found to be interesting is when we start asking, what does actually change in our thinking process, in our ability to be conscious? And what seems to surface, I'm interested in your views on that, is that it makes us more open. That's it. And that is whether it can be explained ultimately by the shutting down of what is called the default mode network. I'm sure you've heard about that, which nobody can describe really that easily. But let's pretend it's the amount of energy, which is huge in our brain, to keep our ego in check, right? That self-referential process. Do you think this is all about just inability to open without judgment, receive, and ultimately remove the straitjacket of materialism or self-limiting beliefs that put us only in that form of primal consciousness? All we need is to get more curious, more open, less judgmental.
I mean, I think the problem with the human brain is that once you've committed to a belief system, you will protect it with your life, because if you see like hints that it's wrong, this physically hurts you. So you become very irrational. And I think kind of having this, I mean, during psychedelics, this ego death and experience of non-duality, I mean, these are like fundamentally cognitively shifting experiences. And when they asked Aldous Huxley, it's not even on YouTube from some program, some black and white footage, where they asked him who should be taking these substances. I think they were referring to LSD. And then he starts with like, yes, professors, and he thinks about it and he says, actually, anybody who's certain about what's happening here, such a person should take this substance. And then, yeah, we come back and have a discussion. And there's actually a research paper where they linked psychedelic use to the adoption of metaphysical idealism and heightened well-being.
Of course.
And also that, I mean, the Johns Hopkins study, I think 2006 or something, where they were kind of one of the first when the sort of the psychedelic renaissance kicked in, where I think the title was something mystical experiences and LSD, like preposterous. I mean, that they even could have it published at the time is like now looking back, I mean, to nowadays it's like, yeah, of course, but at the time, and I mean, people were saying that these experiences were just as important or even more important than having your first child. Or and I mean, we even know from the 60s that people were terminally ill cancer patients were treated, I think, with LSD and to combat the fear of death. And this worked because suddenly you make an experience which is outside of everything you've ever experienced. And this makes you think, well, maybe all the things I've been told aren't quite correct. And maybe there's this thing to it that no one really got right. And this is something where my consciousness will continue, which of course is the core idea in idealism, that your consciousness, it doesn't just get obliterated. It just changes state. It just changes the kind of the realm it is expressed in, but it doesn't lose its coherence. It continues. And actually, I mean, there's even research publications kind of looking at the phenomenology of near-death experiences and DMT experiences and showing how they seem to have similar content. So, which is wild. So basically, the best preparation for dying for us mortals is to have non-ordinary experiences, be they induced however you want. You don't have to take psychedelics. You can do the breath work or the meditation and do that very seriously. But just to say that, yeah, apparently this is what you should expect to happen when your physical body dies, that you will actually find your consciousness continuing in one of these, I call it the transcendental multiverse, the many different sort of realms of existence that you can visit while you're still embodied and alive. But apparently you can, yeah, if you're not tethered to the physical, these are the same places you go to. And I just recently saw a podcast with Chris Beisch, who did the 73 high dose LSD sessions over 20 years, where he really went deep into the metaphysical structure. And his book, LSD in the Mind of the Universe, is just the craziest book I've ever read. I mean, and the ordeals he had to go through, I mean, the ocean of suffering and like it, I mean, crazy. And but he was asked if he feared death, and he said no, not at all, because I know where I'm going, and I just lost my partner. We were together 25 years, but she was also a psychonaut, and I know, I mean, kind of like absolute, absolutely lost any sort of fear of death and dying, which for us is a cultural problem because if you go to Asia, if you're in India, the burning ghats in Varanasi, and you see how they are burning corpses there, and are the atmosphere is, I mean, it's not joyful, but it's the total opposite of like at our funerals. So kind of the way we deal with mortality in the West is that we try and pretend it's not there and we're forever young, and longevity and we're going to live forever. So, I mean, this, if you never have these experiences and you claim with certainty that these are just hallucinations, come on, you're just being romantic. The universe is, it doesn't have any purpose, and you're just going to die, and then it'll be darkness, and just stop being romantic and silly and grow up. I mean, such a person really should consider immersing themselves in the unordinary states and then continue the conversation after that.
I think what you're describing here is really that we can only know things by felt experience. There's no other way that we can possibly know. So if you have some kind of a judgment about what death is going to be like, or even a judgment about taking psychedelics or entering non-ordinary states of consciousness in a certain way, then we have this opportunity, I guess, to say that we understand something, but we don't really understand it unless we actually have the experience of it. And that was the same for me when I had that mystical experience. My entire life changed because I could no longer be the person that I was before that because I had seen too much in a way. And the way that you're describing your own psychedelic experiences, which do mirror, in fact, many of the experiences that I have had, it is being in that space and having those experiences that feel every bit as real sometimes as this ordinary everyday reality that we are experiencing. I wanted to take us back for just a moment to something that you said a little bit earlier, and that was you mentioned just in passing that you can be guided by the field. And I really appreciate that because I, for one, really believe in that. I think that we all have intuition. That's what we call it in our modern society. But that intuition is when we are plugged into the field. And to take that a step further, I really espouse the idea that we have a blueprint, that we were consciousness before we were born into this world of form, this reality, and that perhaps we, if that's the case, that maybe we made the decision to come into this reality in order to have certain experiences so that the field can grow, the field can learn and enrich itself and have all of these experiences through us individually. So I'm curious about what you think about the idea of a blueprint. And in fact, if that is the case, then that encompasses all of the what we would call bad experiences as well as the good ones. And I think it changes it so that we can't really have a bad experience. Like your bad trip on LSD when you were a teenager wasn't really bad because that motivated you to something or pushed you to something or gave you a new perspective on something or made you realize what you didn't want or whatever it was. It was actually directing you in a certain direction so that you could have the additional experiences in your life that you wanted to have. So you can take that wherever you like, but I'm just very curious to see how this fits with your own perspectives.
Absolutely. And this is also something I always sort of felt resonated when I was reading about these ideas also way back when I was a lot younger, that somehow, yeah, just sort of recontextualizing these ideas. And it goes to the core of recontextualizing suffering, which, yeah, because if there's this divine love, then why the hell are we so much suffering? And as you say, if there is a process that's being enacted, then what we are seeing now is a transition phase. So old systems are breaking and new systems haven't quite arrived. So during that time, everything is chaos and looks really bad. But again, that's just the state now and not something which is inherently going wrong. This is part of the process where, as you say, it's light and dark. You have to have both. Although light has more, like light is the energy and darkness is the opposite. So I don't switch on darkness, I switch on the light. But still, you have the two opposites in our dual realities. So if you're going to have bliss and happiness, you need to have suffering and sorrow. So these are part of the contextual field. And the question is like, what do you do with that? Like, Do you actually suffer from this, or are these things which look like they could induce suffering, like you transform them and look at them in a different way? And sort of in a bigger context, in the Sapient Cosmos, I try and argue for this idea for will to complexity. So, and I think it's pretty obvious. We're sitting in this little bubble of order. I mean, the universe is going into entropic decay and everything is becoming disorder. And we're in this little bubble of structure, and more structure is being built. There's more computation, more cognition. Now it's even our software that's starting to be intelligent. So it's not only in nature and in our consciousness. And just saying that this is a brute fact and it's random and that just happened with no reason, I find that a very unconvincing explanation. There must be some teleology. There just must. This has a direction. This is an assembly line for more complexity. This is baked into the evolution of the universe. And this could even be a physical force we haven't discovered yet. I mean, this doesn't have to be like a sort of an external imprinting from the field. I mean, this could be something that's actually baked into the structure of reality. I mean, just as sort of as one example, we now know that simple rules give rise to complexity. This is part of the blueprint. This is how the structure of reality is built. There's no reason this should be the case. But we're in the universe which has that, which has very interesting implications for how complexity forms. And these are the things that Stephen Wolfram, the physicist, the computer scientist guy, he's been talking about these ideas for over 20 years, and only slowly now people are listening to him. And going inside, like, or more sort of a micro level, I mean, this idea, I mean, the word synchronicity is still being used to this day because people keep experiencing these things. And I personally do as well. And I have a choice to say, oh, that was just a coincidence. What you're going to do? Or we could take seriously what Jung and Pauli were talking about, that there is a structuring, a novel causal layer of ordering which we haven't discovered yet, but this is having an influence on how this is evolving. And I would also claim that it fits nicely within idealism, because sort of this synchronicity seems to be this matching of inner and outer meaning. And again, if the inner is the same essence as the outer, then you kind of expect that there would be these matchings that would come together. So again, only by adopting a physicalist metaphysics, you find this all very weird and come on, these people are lying, or they're just like, it's cognitive biases, and they just think they're seeing these patterns, but they're not there. And I find this is sort of also a reason why, I mean, this is sort of a very disenchanted outlook. And I find it so sad that science, which is metaphysically neutral, it tells you how stuff works very well, that science is taken and it said, look, science is telling us that we live in a disenchanted universe. It's just random. There's no purpose and you die at the end. This is not true. And we've been telling this narrative for, I don't know, 400 years or whatever. And this is not true. We shouldn't be telling this, because these are metaphysical claims which are getting mixed with claims of certainty about, or scientific claims. And yeah, I think we should sort of get back to a program of re-enchanting the universe. I mean, just for us personally as well, like, I mean, the beauty in nature, the intelligence in nature it's insane. And we've just become so accustomed of like waking up in the morning, and you're on this planet that's circling a sun, and we have this biological program that's been running for whatever 4 or 5 billion years, and all this structure and complexity, and it all seems so just so normal and just so unspectacular. But I mean, if you think about it, this is just beyond words. And again, by moving out of this sort of rational thinking, you become more open to seeing these things with fresh eyes. Again, I don't know, with the help of psychedelics, where suddenly you look at a flower and you just get lost in the infinite complexity and beauty of what is there, which you would otherwise just walk past and not realize. So, yeah, we have disenchanted the universe by telling lies about science, which is sad because there's no way that this should be the case. I mean, we can have an enchanted science, we can have a scientific spirituality combining both the looking outward and the looking inside and the working with our consciousness. There's no reason we shouldn't be able to do that. And I think these ideas are, again, things that are seem to be surfacing again, and more people are being open to these things and not as dogmatic as people have been regarding these topics for quite a while.
Yeah, and the indigenous people, as you mentioned earlier, have known this for thousands and thousands of years, and somehow it got lost in Western civilization along the way. But I do believe, and I think we are witnessing more of a collective awakening on this planet, at least a collective raising of consciousness. And that raising of consciousness, of course, is what leads us to be even more open, as Christophe was suggesting earlier. So it builds and feeds on itself. And when you look at materialistic science, it does keep us in that little box where we can't possibly grow from that greater consciousness in that kind of self-feeding loop and that self-organizing process. Also, I really appreciate that you brought Jung in because, of course, he is one of the key pioneers in the work that I do. And he really talked a lot about soul, the word soul, and he suggested that soul is what makes meaning in our lives. And so just bringing that back, maybe just a comment more than a question, and I'll let Christophe jump in and maybe get the last word here. But I think the idea of soul making meaning for us does allow us to begin to understand that everything that happens is for a reason. And I don't mean to say that and sound trite because sometimes it can come across that way, but to understand, if we can truly understand as individuals and then therefore as a collective, that anything that is happening in our lives is not happening to us, it's actually happening for us, then everything can change. And it allows us to look at the outer world, as you're suggesting, and seeing what I would call collapse, maybe even culture collapse, which was the focus of my own doctoral work. But to your point, these systems and these structures have to come down. We have to get space somewhere in order for something new to come in, for that new consciousness to make its way into our own awareness. And so I'm just really so thrilled by this conversation because it gives us so many opportunities to look at life from so many different perspectives and to see where the true growth and transformation can actually occur. Christophe, do you want to jump in with another question or comment?
I want to bring back Bohm again, just because each time I watch him talk or watching a short conference where he was right next to the Dalai Lama, explaining the implicate order versus the explicate order. And the interviewer, and that was the sad part of it, just didn't get it. He was trying to trip him, and just you could tell if you don't converse or dialogue with people who are at the same level of consciousness or frequency or field or whatever, they just don't get it. And it's not because they're stupid. It's because they're not able to elevate their thinking. So my question to you is, when I say to you, are we now really under a crisis of thinking? And can that explain our inability, or at least the large population, limited access to this field of consciousness we want so much to see everybody access?
I think to come back to something Bonnie said before, so this mode of experiential knowledge, just that we're just taught that, yeah, you have to be in this rational, sober, waking state to be able to do anything. All other states are deviations and should be avoided. And yeah, that's not true because you can experience something. I mean, you can have experiential knowledge of things which are trans-rational, things which you cannot understand, like the experience of non-duality, where the subject and object fuse. This makes no sense rationally, but this is accessible to experience, and you can have this. And coming back to consciousness, that's sort of another blind spot where consciousness is, or human, I mean, first of all, the supremacy of human consciousness, where slowly we're realizing, actually everywhere. It's like even tissue, Michael Levin, or plant consciousness. I mean, these are serious topics now, which for a long time, yeah, animals were seen as little robots with no inner lives. And yeah, which is just disastrous because yeah, again, mind-boggling. But so first of all, we are seeing intelligence in all places we're looking in different expressions. I mean, even like an octopus with, I think 1/3 of the neurons are centralized and the rest are in the 8 arms, which begs the question, does an octopus have a unified experience of being something, or does it have a decentralized consciousness? I mean, what would that even mean? And but coming back to human consciousness, we think the thing that we have is something which will stay. And this idea that no, consciousness undergoes an evolution as well. This is something that is often just totally forgotten. And again, it's something that other cultures have talked about. In Indian wisdom traditions, the evolution of consciousness is clearly a dynamic in the evolution of the cosmos. And Aurobindo talks about this, I think, with his supermind. And even the theoretical physicist called Martin Rees, also a big figure, at one point he was saying, look, in a couple of billion years, I mean, this is assuming that, yeah, we don't reset the level of cognition of the animals around, including humans as animals, will be so different to us as we are to amoeba. So the guy really understood that there is something happening, there's a trajectory. And so the question becomes like, okay, where exactly are we and where are all different people? And probably it's just like at every instant, you just have this distribution of where things at, but the mean is something which is gonna be on this trajectory and it's going to be expressed. And again, coming back to Chris Beige, for him, I mean, he spent 10 years after the 20 years of immersion. It took him 10 years to come off the mountain, he called it, because physical reality was so bland. It was just so unspectacular to what he had been experiencing that he just thought, okay, well, just waiting basically for this to be over. And then after 10 years, he suddenly realized that maybe he got it the wrong way around. Maybe the project of what's happening here in the physical is that complexity and consciousness increases, that more of the transcendence can flow in and be expressed in the physical. And I just think this is such a wonderful story. And it kind of goes into, I don't know, it sort of reminds me a bit of this Leela in Hindu philosophy where you have God and it's very boring being God because there's nothing else apart from God. So nothing happens. And then God starts to hide itself from itself to discover itself. And then this whole cosmic drama happens. And it's all this amazing, these things, but it's not in the sense real. So suffering and bliss and all these states of experience are, again, as Bonnie said, these are just the things that want to happen here, want to be experienced, and as Chris Beige says, at ever higher and higher levels of consciousness, of awareness, of, I don't know, embodied transcendence, or I don't even know the words for it. And I find these are very comforting sort of ways to look at the future and look at the problems we are facing now, which are so terrible. It's just, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, well, I love that word comforting, and it definitely brings us, ourselves into a place where we can, as we witness the chaos going on around us and the destruction of these structures and the systems that feel really profoundly endangered right now. These are the things that have made up our identity for our entire lives. And so it can be very devastating for us as human beings in the society to witness these things happening and not have a larger structure to be able to understand these. I think your work does that really so profoundly. And you mentioned your book in passing, but I want to make sure that everybody knows about that as we come to a close here. So The Sapient Cosmos is a profound book. It's very thick and it contains so much of your fascinating ideas.
It's blurred. It's blurred.
We'll put that up on the screen. But I have so many more questions for you, James. I wish we had hours and hours for this. We'll have to have you come back, but we're so appreciative of you showing up and having the time, making the time for us to have this conversation. Christophe, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add, but then James, I'd love to have you have the last word here as we close out.
I'll just echo your final notes. I too wish to engage in dialogue with you for many hours. I also like your remarkable optimism. And many of the topics that we're confronting today can really take people down. But under all of this, the message that you are creating and distributing with so much courage, with so much devotion, I shall say, is so, so powerful. And we aim to amplify that as much as we can for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And maybe as a closing word, I think it's really simple if we all just strive to become happier people, just individually for ourselves, because a collective of happy people will not look as the society we have today. And I mean, we know so many things that make us happier, and we seem to be doing the exact opposite. I mean, just beginning with sleep and nutrition and exercise and kind of this sort of mental hygiene and mindfulness and these relational aspects to other people, to nature, and also fundamentally kind of the choices you make metaphysically, because these are the foundation. How do you contextualize suffering, death, meaning, purpose? And if you don't have good answers to these questions, then you will kind of be lost. And I find that, yeah, as I outlined, our science, the way we've distorted science gives a bad answer there, but also many, I don't know, religious practices or religious systems as well, because they just give you some dogmatic, static answer, which cannot be true because it keeps evolving. It cannot be that there was once an answer which is going to be valid for eternity. That just makes no sense. So I find that, yeah, we have now sort of options or healthier options for more empowering metaphysics, like the renaissance of idealism, if you want to look into that, because it makes rationally as much sense as any other, and it's even something you can potentially experience. So, and if that's your foundation, then you can really start to sort of think about suffering in different ways and maybe not experience suffering in such a profound way as you would if you just have like no anchoring or no orientation in this sort of metaphysical blur which you're just thrown into if you're not guided, if you don't have any help from like any traditions. So yeah, let's try and be happier people.
What a
Yeah.
great message to end on.
I would just add too that, all of those avenues that you're talking about and that happiness itself often comes from making that deeper connection with ourselves, that connection with our bigger selves that are not just the everyday self, that are tapped into this field that you're talking about.
That's also something I experienced in one of the ayahuasca sessions, that to heal the world, you first have to heal yourself, or to love the world, you first have to love yourself. And it seems so trivial, but somehow it's something we keep stumbling over. And like, yeah, we don't really have tools of cultivating self-compassion because either it's narcissism or, yeah, some other dysfunctional way we engage with ourselves. And yeah, we should also be gentler and kinder with ourselves. But there are tools and there's people who can help you. And yeah, from psychology to there's a wealth of tools you can try and find to help guide you through there.
Little anecdote on a journey with ayahuasca. She instructed me to investigate self-love as a scientist. And I'm like, what? And she actually downloaded the outline of my first book, The Serenity Code. Is completely a download from an ayahuasca journey. And every single step after that, many, many ayahuasca sessions were constantly reminding me of my responsibility to distribute knowledge around self-love.
Very nice.
Well, Jay,
right.
thank you so much again for your time. Where can people find you if they'd like to learn more about your book and your work in general?
Probably my webpage, which is a cryptic. It's jth.ch.
Okay. Easy enough. We'll put that on the screen also for everybody in the notes below. So again, thank you so much. Hello, Soul family. Thanks for watching this episode of Soul, Cosmos, and Consciousness. If you haven't subscribed yet, please take a moment and hit that subscribe button right now so that we can continue to bring you more of these fascinating conversations.